Hey, everybody, welcome to Talkin' Fire. My name is Dean Babineau. Thanks for tuning in today. We've got a great lineup. This is our second part of kind of our two-part series on the National Fire Academy and the value it brings. We've got another great group of panelists, and I'm really excited to introduce them and have them just talk about why the National Fire Academy is important to them. A longtime friend of mine, Joe Guarnera, Chief Joe Guarnera, is here with us. Joe and I have probably known each other my entire fire service career, 25 years. John Yovanovitch from Texas, Arlington, city of Arlington, Texas. I've known him maybe 5 years, 6 years, something like that. We met down at the National Fire Academy, and then Tiger Schmittendorf's joining us from upstate New York. So it's a pleasure for me to have two other folks that are in the same time zone. It definitely made my life a little easier to plan for this. Guys, thank you for joining me, and thank you for advocating for the National Fire Academy. So why don't we go around the horn real quick? And we'll just, talk about maybe why the National Fire Academy is important to you. Chief Guarnera, why don't we start with you?
Well, obviously, educational-wise, it's great to take classes there, and the networking is fantastic. But why the National Fire Academy is really close to me is I'm on one of their committees. It's called the FESHI Committee. It's Fire and Emergency Service Higher Education. About 25 years ago, Dr. O'Neill, the then superintendent, just realized that, we have to promote higher education in the fire service. It's not just a bunch of people putting the wet stuff on the red stuff. We need to be educated. Vehicles and vehicles don't have horsehair seats anymore. It's all hydrocarbons and plastic. So we need to get educated. And through himself and Ed Kaplan, who was the educational specialist at that time, they developed this committee, the FESHI Committee. Fire and Emergency Service Higher Education. And what they did was they really promoted, they try to recruit people who are not only practitioners that were firefighters or in the fire service, but they were also educators, college professors, whatever it may be. So I was lucky enough to be on one of those committees. And Dr. O'Neill's whole idea was that have a model curriculum in the fire service. But whether it's a baccalaureate, an associate's program, whatever it may be, that we, the committees, wrote the curriculum. So that no matter where you went to college, if you were a FESHI program, you learned the same curriculum. So whether you're in Texas or in New York or in Massachusetts, if you're in a FESHI program, whatever your associate's degree program was taught was the exact same core curriculum as we did in Massachusetts. So it was a great thing and very, very popular, very successful, and it's still very successful. So that, I think Dr. O'Neill's vision with the fire service being a profession, and it all started with him, and Ed Kaplan and really pushing it. So that's my real big, love for the academy, other than, of course, the courses,
Right. We're going to go to John next, but before we do that, I do want to mention that, folks that are looking for schools, both of my schools are FESHI schools. The way I got my associates, I think I got it before they were a FESHI school, but maybe not. And then, when I was looking for a bachelor's, I went to Anna Maria in Paxton here, Massachusetts, and that was one of the things that I was looking for when I was looking for a bachelor's program was a FESHI school, because at least I knew then had been vetted, and then it followed some standardized curriculum. So, and when folks ask me about, and I don't get asked a lot, but when folks ask me about higher education, that's one of the things I direct them toward. Like, if you're really looking for something fire science based, like, there you go. Like, or emergency services based, that's something to look at. So, kind of thank you for mentioning that, because I may have forgotten that if you had.
And the list of schools are right on the National Fire Academy website.
Yep. Yeah. And the website's still alive and well. So
Yes,
I was on it, last night, so it's still alive and well. So, John, what's your connection? I'm sorry. Sure, I can call you Chief as well. I apologize.
I'm good with John, good with Chief. I'm actually here at my volunteer fire department, which I do to help serve my community. And here, I'm a firefighter.
Beautiful.
I refuse to promote.
Beautiful.
I've done that before in the volunteer environment, and my wife and I serve here. We just have a blast being volunteers.
Great.
They try to make me do chief level stuff. I'm like, hey, I got a toilet to go clean. I'll be right back. So, but no, if I had to be honest, I don't even remember how I found out about the National Fire Academy. My earliest recollection was at some point it was determined I want to go. And I remember talking to Neil Strasser, one of our battalion chiefs. He's long since retired. Love him and all those chiefs to death. That when I was a rookie, I was at fire training, and I whatever reason we're talking about it. He's like, "Yeah, you need to go to National Fire Academy." So I'm not sure if Chief Strasser introduced it to me or if I came to him with the idea. But he actually took my application from me and said, "I'll fill out that box. I think it was used to be 15 that says why you need to go." And he taught me later how you fill that out, and that's why. But I actually went. It's been at least 15 years ago as a firefighter, firefighter rank with my career department, where I went to National Fire Academy for the first time. I've been there now for 9 resident classes. I believe 6 or 7 state delivered classes. I wasn't able to look and see to make sure. We use a TEACS, Texas A&M University TEACS system, is our state provider here in Texas. And I believe I've had at least 6 classes that are state delivered classes. And then in part of 2 resident programs, Dean with you, managing officer, and now with executive fire officer. I've attended at every level, every rank. I went as a firefighter. I went as an apparatus operator. I went as a lieutenant, and I went as the captain. Now I've gone as a battalion chief, and I've grown from it each time. I'm sure we'll talk more about this. And like I mentioned before, it's not just for career. It's not just for volunteers. It's for everyone in the fire service. All 1.2 million of us that are out there right now in the U.S.
Absolutely, everybody. Tiger, what's your kind of connection? What's your general feeling, if you will?
Yeah. So, I mean, personally, I think I probably took a couple of NFA supported outreach classes, probably at our county fire academy, which we have 3 of here in Erie County. And before I physically went to the National Fire Academy, and I remember it vividly, I literally wrote a magazine article about it. It was in 2007. I had nearly 30 years in the fire service before I physically went to the campus. And I can tell you a couple of the emotions that came away from that was, one, I was embarrassed that it took me that long to make the pilgrimage, so to speak, to get to the National Fire Academy, and certainly the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation memorial as well. I was embarrassed by that. And I can tell you, that immediately made me an advocate for both the NFA and the NFFF, and volunteered with the NFFF for over 10 years following that. That particular experience was, I went for a train the trainer for leadership and safety, and it was the first of its kind that was being delivered and put out to the field and so forth. But 2 things literally about that visit to the NFA, it both changed my life and, in a strange twist of events, nearly cost me my life. Before the first day of class, I spent the night in the Gettysburg Hospital. And before the second day of class, met a cohort of about 25 instructors from around the country. Several of us went out to dinner afterwards. We went to the battlefield to watch the sun go down over the mountains. Went back down to Emmitsburg, and I said to the group, I said, guys, I don't mean to be that guy, but I don't know that I'm going to make it. And they called an ambulance for me and took me back up to Gettysburg. And I'm laying there in the hospital for about 45 minutes. I can't remember anybody's name. I don't have their cell phone numbers, and they have my rental car. And about 15 minutes later, the nurse walks in and she says, just so you know, there's 8 firefighters in the waiting room waiting for you. And so, that would surprise a lot of people. It didn't surprise me, but that's, to me, that encapsulates what the NFA is about. And also probably her next comment was, but don't worry about them. They're entertaining everyone. Right. So, it ended up, I got discharged at like 3:30 in the morning. They stuck with me through it all, took me back to the dorm, said, sleep in the morning. They literally, when I walked into class in the morning, took my keys, packed my bags, and drove me to the airport to send me home with what ended up being pneumonia.
Wow.
And so My first visit was very abbreviated, but it was enormously impactful. And I just actually, John, you made the comment you weren't sure how many classes you've taken. I had to look at literally my resume. I've probably taken 15 or 20 NFA courses, mostly outreach courses in a variety of settings. And I've only had the opportunity to teach at the NFA once. And Joe, you'll be pleased, it was for a FESHE professional development symposium where I was able to teach my class. It's titled From the Xbox to the Box Alarm, Connecting Today's Firefighters. So, and another NFA experience, tornado warning interrupted teaching my class.
Oh,
so had some really awesome times at the NFA. I can't say enough about it. Yeah.
It's funny how, even such a simple question, right? Three guys that don't really know each other, and we'll stick with that.
Right.
Four guys, I guess it's four of us, right? Right. And
Yeah.
who just don't really know each other, but all of a sudden there's these stories that interconnect us, right? Because that's the fire service. And I think really it's probably any group, but it just seems like that's what happens in the fire service is you get these stories that then interconnect us in some way. And we forget that sometimes, right? That we are truly all on the same team.
Well, and to the point, Dean, the NFA is the common denominator.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, exactly, right? I mean,
right? That's literally what has brought us together.
Yeah, I posted the other day that it 100% changed my professional life. Like it 100. There wouldn't be a podcast. I wouldn't be where I am. I have probably 4 friends from the NFA that I talk to every couple of weeks, especially when things are really good or when they're really not. Like those are some of the people I call. And that's really cool. And you don't get that anywhere, right? Yeah, or you don't get that a lot of places. You don't get that in a one-day class. I find when you go somewhere and you're there for a couple of days or more, you start to immerse yourself in this, between whether it's going up to the outhouse or the VFW or any other place local there in Emmitsburg, or whether it's being at the command post pub and sitting in that, in the big room with the pool table going and all that, and just talking about the fire service and even about just a little bit of life, you then start to form connections, right? The majority of the people that I talk to out of, the handful of people, they're not the people who went back to their dorm at 4:30 and then they had to work until midnight or something. And I don't begrudge them that either, right? We all end up, I think one of my trips, I was kind of that hermit guy because I was behind some things. I had, I was taking some classes. I had to get some stuff done. And, but I also came home not really knowing anybody in my class. A lot of content, but I didn't really know anybody in my class. So why don't we focus now? We kind of talked about how we're connected, but let's talk about the value that the NFA, whether it's on campus or off campus, the value that the in-person training brings. So, and whether it's to firefighters, to fire officers, to chief level officers, but the value that the fire service gets from the NFA. And John, why don't we start? We'll start in Texas. We'll kind of work our way back.
That'll work. I'll start here. It's earlier here than it is there.
Correct.
So, yeah. Anyway, first and foremost, leaving your bubble, getting out of your comfort area, always helps inspire learning. And by traveling to a resident course in Emmitsburg, or as I've done here with some of the state delivery classes, I've actually traveled out of town to go get some of those state delivery classes. Stayed in a hotel. One time I went to Stephenville, Texas. It's about 2.5, almost 3 hours from my house. And actually, Bryson Kennedy down there, I texted him and said, "Hey, you got an NFA class coming up? Can I come?" And he's like, "Yeah." And they actually, the fire department adopted me. They took me out to dinner and then made sure I got back to the hotel okay. And the next morning, had me show up early. Mind you, this is my vacation day. Show up early to eat breakfast at the fire station before we had class. So that's all part of that, where you're actually like getting to meet other people outside of your own department, outside of your own county, your own area, and be able to start emphasizing that networking. When my very first NFA class as a ranked firefighter, I do not know why, but Howard Cross, who used to teach in the EFO program, he latched on to me. And every night at the command post, he would drag me over to the EFO class. You want to talk about some great networking. I mean, it was, mouth shut, ears open. And he didn't do that just once. He did that for 2 classes. My next visit, I showed back up. Howard's like, John, where have you been? Come on over. It got me, networking with chief officers from across the country. And that's huge. So my third time when I got there, I went looking around. I couldn't find Howard. I'm like, oh, guess I'm on my own. So as learning, as Howard and others had mentioned me, I brought a stack of patches from my departments. I brought some challenge coins, and I went to the command post, got 3 pitchers of adult beverages. Must have been summer because they were giving us ice packs, or they were pre-COVID, like you Ziploc bag or ice pack to put in the pitchers. And I put 3 pitchers on the table, stack of the disposable cups, and the patches and the coins. And I actually I was not being locked in my room, Dean, like you were telling. I was actually doing my homework there in the command post. And I would see people walking by, and they're just kind of looking side-eye, like, what's going on there? Why's all the patches? And next thing you know, those are the only 3 pitchers I bought for the night. And we'd have 20, 30 people sitting there trading patches, trading coins, trading stories, and most importantly, contact information. So that's definitely, it's not just what you learn in the class, it's what you can learn outside the class as well. One last thing, and coming back to Joe, you mentioned you're on the FESHI. I need to say thank you. One of the values that I earned, or the value I got from the National Fire Academy, was through the FESHI program. If my documentation is correct, I've got 18 hours of my bachelor's degree was from FESHI programs classes, and 15 hours of my master's degree, assuming we work through all of this, will actually be from the Executive Fire Officer program.
Mm-hmm.
All FESHI. And Joe, thank you, and your committee and your team that put all that together with Dr. O'Neill. Thank you for taking care of that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joe, while you're talking, we'll go right up to you. So, Joe, what value does the National Fire Academy bring firefighters, departments?
It's almost word for word ditto. Just getting out there and just networking, being out of your own element, talking to other people without, other people who have experienced the same, it's like homogeneous, clustering. We talk to people who have the same ideologies as we do, whether you're in New York, Texas, Massachusetts. Listen, the problems are the same. The playbook is the same. The players are different, and you might find out we have the same type of problem, but we worked on it this way. This is a good way of doing something. Just networking, sitting in that pub. Personally, I'm not a drinker. I'll drink my water or whatever in there. It doesn't matter. We all just sit at a table and we talk, and it's a great thing, And I thought I was the only person at Howard Cross who remembered my name and kept on going up. So you just bust my bubble. Thank you very much. But yeah, I mean, you learn, you see these people, you talk to them. I mean, one of the best people I ever met in my life and became a very good friend was Dr. O'Neill. He's one of my mentors. He's a great friend. Whenever he's up here, we go out to dinner, and we actually went out to dinner just last week, himself and my wife, and just learning and it's just like just getting the experience of people from all over the country, and others. I mean, I became a good friend with a guy from Guam. I mean, that's what you see at the National Fire Academy. Not only do you see it, I mean, being on campus, it's just awe. It's just this sense of awe, and seeing all those bricks, people awarded bricks in memory of, or whatever it may be. It's just the network. To me, it's the networking and the friendship. And I forget who said it, I apologize, but going for that week or 2 class, I think Dean, you said, going that week or 2 class and just getting to know these people. And after the second day, who's driving tonight to go here and who's going here and meet us at breakfast in the morning and whatever it may be. I mean, that's worth, it's just worth the memories themselves, and just, it's just kind of melancholy in a way that, we don't do it as much.
Yeah.
And, for people not to even know, because when I speak or when I do anything, I always bring up the National Fire Academy and how many people have gone. It's amazing. And like you said, Tiger, it took you so long to go. Same here. Don't even know about the National Fire Academy. Don't know that it's free. They don't know that they'll fly you one time a year. They'll fly you or transport you. Why not go there? And it's like Dr. O'Neill always said, it's your academy. This is your academy. Be proud of it. So,
Yeah, and
you know,
that's getting the message out. And I do think that they train about 60,000 now post COVID, a year, and pre COVID. Tiger, we're going to get to you, Chief. So just they were training closer to 100K before COVID a year between field deliveries and in person and whatnot. And I think when this is over and the National Fire Academy opens back up, whatever it's going to look like, we're going to talk about that a little later. It really is going to be up to, I'll say, us to just keep banging the drum about how important it is. Because the same thing, like, if I think about how I got there, one of our assistant chiefs, when I think I had maybe just gotten hired full time, and he was a call assistant chief. He had gone down for a couple of state weekends that Mass had hosted there. And we're not a bad ride, 6 hours or so. So he was like, I drove down for the weekend, and I know, John, 6 hours doesn't even get you out of Texas, but for us, it can get you from Mass down. Frankly, depending on where in New York, you could drive 6 hours and still be in New York. But for us, it can get you pretty far out of Massachusetts. So, he's like, Dean, it's worth the ride. Get in the car, go down there. And that he was the first person to ever tell me about it. And frankly, I've probably told 6 people about it. More. But I'm talking direct. And of that, I think 2 or 3 have said, you know what, I'll burn a couple of vacation days, or I'll burn a couple training days or whatever. And I don't know. I've told people at FDIC and they go, meh, or you tell them about it, even a local conference. And we talked about, we got an episode of the podcast coming out over the weekend after this one, but about local conferences and the value of local conferences, and because that's, something else, right? But so talking about value and benefits NFA brings to departments. And Tiger, you said, Chief, that you've been to a number of, I'll say, local deliveries from the NFA. So, can you talk a little bit about the value that brings to departments, that kind of on the road stuff, and the value that brings? And I'm not going to stifle you. You can talk about any value you want, but talk about the values the NFA brings to the fire service. You're muted, Chief. That happens.
Sorry.
It's okay. The only reason it doesn't happen to me is because Mac doesn't let me have a mute, so I can't.
Yeah, right.
So I can't even cough. Like, I am stuck here. Like, my mic's hot, and that's why we don't run to that. But okay, there you go, Chief. Values.
Yeah. So I think it was likely one of those local outreach programs that actually made me aware that the National Fire Academy existed. And I can tell you my first impressions of just the instructors that come from literally all over the country, sometimes even further to teach on behalf of the NFA, had just enormous impacts on me. And to think that I could be in my own hometown and be connected to somebody in Texas, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, or the West Coast, because they came to share their knowledge and experience with us, is one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given. And the influence that those folks have had on me, as you know, it's not just the curriculum, which is, proven to be solid content and enormously valuable within itself, but their delivery style, the context that they bring to the content, and the experience that is embedded in all of that, makes it real, makes it realistic, makes it relevant, and sometimes, unfortunately, almost immediately applicable as well. And I can think of literally specific classes that it was almost like premonitions, right? I would take a class on a particular subject and we would suffer that type of emergency or disaster in Buffalo or Western New York. And I can think of a couple instances that had I not taken that class and even had any level of awareness related to that particular issue, I never, ever would have been as successful as I had the opportunity to be in the position within the incident command system or emergency management or whatever the situation provided. So I hadn't thought about it until you reached out to me, Dean. Honestly, just what tremendous value and what an impact the National Fire Academy has had on me. physically going there is kind of taking it to a whole nother level. I call it going to the Mecca of the fire service, right? And and you brought up too, Joe, and I think Dean, you talked about it, that how many firefighters don't even know that it exists, right? And it's within a day's drive of, probably hundreds of thousands of firefighters on the East Coast who have no awareness of it or simply aren't willing to make the trip. And then the further west you go, it's not even on their radar, right? So I'm a firm believer every organization suffers from best kept secrets, and the National Fire Academy is literally a best kept secret of the American Fire Service. And I think back to that first experience in 2007, being there, as I share the story, and I can tell you, every time I get together with those 8 firefighters, wherever it is across the country at another NFA class at FDIC, the story gets bigger every time, right? And the nearness to death gets closer every time, and so forth. But I always tell the story that those 8 firefighters had been lifelong friends of mine for well over 6 hours by the time I had that episode, right? But that's exactly what they are now. They are lifelong friends, and we seek each other out. We stay connected through social media. Literally just invited one of those individuals and his wife to spend time with Lori, my wife, and I in Florida for a week last week. We went down for Yankee spring training. Sorry if that offends.
It does.
Joe or
It does,
Yep.
but I mean, we'll overlook it. We'll overlook it.
But that's the value, the total value of the National Fire Academy, both in an in-person setting and the outreach classes that they provide. I honestly don't know that you can put a price tag on it. And I will say this though, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, is the return on investment has to come from all of us.
Yeah, that right, because ROI, return on investment, is important.
Right.
And we can parlay that into where I want to go next is in the value it brings to the community. So, and I'll right, because let's face it, the shutdown, the audit. I mean, they shut it down so they can audit it, right? And that comes down to the administration looking at where the taxpayers' dollars are going and how they're being used. And that's okay. I mean, for a bunch of reasons. I mean, I pay taxes, and I'm okay with somebody like making sure my money's going where they think it's going. I'm whether I agree or disagree with methodology, but whatever. I mean, that doesn't matter to me right now in this conversation. But taking that time to analyze where the money goes makes sense. But I guess, we can talk about the value it brings to the American Fire Service, the networking. It's made a huge impact on me. It's obviously made an impact on all of you. I mean, it is true, like when you're at a National Fire Academy class, especially if you're there, and obviously, Tiger, your story, Chief, is resounding. But, it's kind of one of the only places I've ever been where I've been like, hey, my keys are on the table. If anybody needs my car, it holds 6 people. Just, whatever. If you scratch it, let me know. Like that's it. Like, you don't put gas in it. It's got plenty. Don't feel the need to vacuum it out. Like, none of that. Just if you put a scratch in it, let me know so I get it fixed when I get home. Like, other than that, take it. And that was kind of like every day or every afternoon. Or like if somebody had to go somewhere, they're like, oh, you're going to town. No, I'm not, but you are. Just take the car. It's insured. It doesn't matter. I live in Mass. Like, gotta have insurance. So like, whatever. But I guess like those things don't translate to the public, right? Like when I tell my next door neighbor that the National Fire Academy is important because I got lifelong friends from there, why should they pay for me to meet new lifelong friends? Why should they pay for me to have a really cool experience? And, why should they pay for me to be 12 or 14 minutes from Gettysburg where I can go in the evening, right, and walk around? Why should they? So that's right, because there's an element of that. Why should they? And so I guess that's the next question. And Joe, we'll start with you. if I'm talking to my neighbor, what's kind of that answer? Like what's in it for them? What are our thoughts?
My analogy, when you're a doctor and you say you went to Harvard, right off the bat, there's this expectation and this aura around that. You know what I'm saying? You take a class and you say, okay, well, we can take chief fire officer, okay. If you go and take managing fire officer or EFO, it has that much more. Now, I'm not saying that, Mass Fire Academy is phenomenal. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. Teaks, forget about it, phenomenal. You can learn all these things, but it's just something that the National Fire Academy just has. That's where the Feshy thing comes in also.
Mhm.
You have these people that are being vetted, but hand chosen at the national level to do this. So if the National Fire Academy is vetting and endorsing this school and their program, to me, they wouldn't put their name on it if it wasn't something good that they would be proud of. I think the same way about the academy, the instructors. You don't just become an instructor at the National Fire Academy because people like you. It's because you're qualified to do so. So when you go up there, you're learning from the best from wherever. They could be from California, Nevada, Massachusetts, Texas. It really doesn't matter. So to me, that's the credibility of the National Fire Academy, the knowledge of the people who teach up there, and the people that, professional development. That's what it's all about. So,
Right.
like you said, a lot of people won't. You said, Tiger. We were doing a cars drive. Vehicles drive. All right, car. Okay, I'm from Massachusetts. A vehicles drive to the academy. You really have to want to learn to step out of your box and do that. But people come from all over the place. So you have somebody come from Hawaii. That's going to take like a day almost to get there. But they know that when they go there, they're being taught the best from the best. To me, it's like the Harvard University of the fire service, and not putting down any other place. But to me, Dean, you asked me what
Yep.
I think. That's what I think. That's the way I look at it.
And I guess like when we think about sharing the National Fire Academy with our friends or neighbors or family or whatever, we've got to build that connection, right? We've got to build that connection back to them. Well, how does it relate to them? Hey, you're a nurse. You went to school, right? Yeah. Your patients don't necessarily ask you where you went to school, but at the end of the day, like depending on what you did and the schooling you had and the experiences you've had, that's going to directly correlate to the experience you give.
Mhm.
And so right, because it is a little less tangible, because again, unfortunately, there's still a lot of folks that think, that you just put the wet stuff on the red stuff, and that, in 2025, that can't be further from the truth. 6,500 years ago, that might have been fairly accurate. But I assure you, in the last couple of decades, that's changed a lot.
And
So
by the way, it's the least of what we do these days.
fair,
Right.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
If
and that
I could just
yeah, go ahead.
If I could just add one thing, I also do course evaluations across the country for different programs, but ACE is one of them. And the National Fire Academy has ACE accreditation. Look at their programs to, to put a college credit to it if it does.
Mm-hmm.
And when ACE looks at that, the committees that we're on, we look at the rigor of the program, which means it's not easy. There has to have a certain amount of rigor to it. The extent of the teaching of the program, the testing portion of the program, so that even though the National Fire Academy is really a training per se, like an academy type thing, but there is academically the programs you take there equate to college programs, and that's like what you said. In your problems, John, you got credit in your college from taking an academy class because the classes there are that good. So I apologize for that, Dean, but I mean, I think that just lends the whole thing to that too. Apologies for the interruption.
No, never an interruption, right? That's what we're here for. If it was I mean, if the only way we don't have interruptions is if we talk to ourselves, and even that, I can interrupt myself pretty good.
I do too.
Yeah, like Tiger, some thoughts, Chief, on how we kind of explain the value to our non-fire service friends.
So it's like anything else. It's explaining the why, right? So make it relevant for them. So maybe provide relevancy of a particular incident in your community, right? Whether it was small scale. You remember when we had that fire at 123 Main Street, and everybody was amazed at how we were able to, extinguish it so quickly and minimize the damage, whatever the case may be. I learned that at the National Fire Academy. I learned that strategy, that tactic, whatever the case may be. In a large scale disaster, our first real use of the incident command system in a large scale here in Erie County was in 2006 when we got 2.5 feet of heavy wet snow on October 13th when all the leaves were still on the trees.
Oh, yep.
I was the logistics section chief for close to a year for a $56 million federally declared disaster. I learned that through the National Fire Academy. I never ever would have been as successful as I was had I not learned all of the combined tactics and strategies of incident management, emergency management, and community preservation, had it not been due to my exposure at the National Fire Academy. And a phrase I've kind of coined and used often, I refer to the Maltese Cross as a universal symbol for instant acceptance, right? The universal symbol for instant acceptance. It will get you the keys to a firehouse, as you related, Dean, the key to a rental car that you don't own, or the keys to a city, if you protect it and you respect it, right? I refer to the NFA as a universal symbol for credibility in the fire service. To me, that's the relevance. And if you can make them understand the concept behind the Maltese Cross, and the kind of stories that we've all shared about those real connections that we've made with firefighters and related personnel across this country, then you put it in context of, okay, here's where I learned how to be a better incident commander, emergency manager, logistics section chief, pick your role in a particular type setting, and just show them just how real it is today.
That's a good way of absolutely right. Connect it back to them. Connect it back, because that's going to help them. John,
Right.
your thoughts on the value it brings our neighbors, our friends?
Going along with what Tiger said, it's, we've recently had Lahaina in Hawaii. We've had the Pacific Palisades in Malibu. Here in Texas, we had an entire historic city block burned down in Alpine, Texas. The National Fire Academy provides us with areas where we can learn to reduce risk, increase our ability for response, and then resiliency for not just our departments, but our communities. So reducing the risk. I've taken part of the managing officer program. You and me both have taken this, Dean. The community risk reduction classes. And they have several of those to help us be able to prevent the emergencies. It's not romantic, but think if we've been able to, and I'm not knocking Alpine, they do a great job of what they have, but what if Alpine had been able to prevent the fire that burned down that historic city block? I think it was 6 businesses in those occupancies. 6 businesses. Alpine, Texas is not very big. 6 occupancies that were providing sales tax. These were businesses. How huge was that hit on their sales tax in Alpine, in small Alpine, Texas? Response. Tiger, it sounds like you were an attendee of command and control of natural and man-made disasters. That sounds like from when you're a snowstorm. Thank you, Joe, for that, because that was 3 of my college credit hours for my bachelor's degree through the FESI program. But command and control class for when we have those big disasters. Hazmat. And I'm not knocking it. Someone's got to do this, but those are the ones you really don't see. They only network in themselves around the table at the command post. They go off to the side and do their homework until 10 at night because hazmat's not easy. But having those hazmat classes, the investigation classes, there's a burn lab on campus where our investigators get to go and they get to learn. Our EMS, there's an entire EMS program, everywhere from incident operations to managing an EMS organization, all right there at the National Fire Academy. And then resiliency is something Dean and I are going through right now, Executive Fire Officer, and there's several other classes, both in the National Fire Academy and then through the Emergency Management Institute, classes that concentrate on providing resilient organizations. What happens when you have those emergencies? How do you bounce back? Not just with the organization, but our communities. How can we better prepare our communities to be able to bounce back and be able to recover and have societal restoration as part of our, incidents, the priorities? You were mentioning, Tiger, earlier, about, or no, Joe, I think it was, with the Harvard School, Harvard University. And I was trying to remember the name. There's a few different programs for people to go in at Harvard to learn, not just in the college areas, but also through other aspects. The military's got the War College, the Naval Postgraduate School, National Defense University, the Air University. Fire and EMS and emergency management have the National Fire Academy. That is what elevates us and gives us that step above to make us better, to provide our communities, to provide our citizens a better place and a safer place to live, work, and live.
Yeah, and that's what we've got to pitch, right? And that's what they need to hear. I mean, you brought up community risk reduction, and again, it's not always, we don't always love it, and it's been around for 20 years or more, right? I mean, we still don't always embrace it as firefighters, but the reality is, if we can prevent the problem, whatever the problem is, if we can prevent it, I mean, isn't that perfect? I mean, that's an ideal world, right? I mean, and I don't talk about it a lot, and it's not all that traumatic for me personally, but my family had a business that burned in '86. Now, I was like 8, so like I remember it. Like, it's funny, when I got on the fire department, there's certain smells and stuff that I still remember and can bring me right back. It was like a 2-bay gas station repair shop thing. And my dad rebuilt. I mean, it wasn't it was a thing. Arson job, like 15 businesses in Central Mass all got hit kind of at the same time. I make that number up. It could be 12. It could be, it was like that. It was double digits, but it wasn't quite 20. At least that's what they tied all these guys to. So, I didn't live through it, day to day. I obviously knew that bad things happened to my family when I was 8. So like whatever, 8 or 9 or something like that. But, if you can prevent that from happening, I mean, there's no business for 2 months. There's no, whatever. There's the stress of where's the money going to come from? Are the customers going to come back, or are they not? Have they found a new place to go? Like, so there's a lot of that. And if we can prevent that, and if we can learn something, or when our people learn something, I think that's one of the other things, the fire service it's getting better at, I think, because social media is free. But, when somebody goes to a class and they come back and they roll out a program like SAN for seniors, or they roll out a program for residential, temporary residential lock boxes. Somebody comes back from the hospital, they're going to be laid up for a little while and they want to put a residential lockbox on or whatever. Like, those are the things that we need to do a better job of saying, hey, not only are we rolling this program out, we're rolling it out because Sandy or Tommy or John went to this class, or Bob or Larry, they learned this thing from this class, and that's why we're doing it. We didn't invent it.
Connect the dots.
Yeah, connect the dots. We sent somebody to this thing, this training, this opportunities, or whatever. We invested in our people, and our people brought back this thing that we're doing now that's going to have an impact on our community. And we don't always do that. We say, hey, we're rolling out this new program, or we're doing this, and we make a big deal. We make a lot of noise about a thing, which is good, but we don't always say where the idea came from. So, it makes it look like, oh, they must have just either knew about it somehow. Well, yeah, they knew about it because they took a National Fire Academy class, or they went to FDIC, or they went to a local conference, or they went to FRI or Symposium in the Sun, or, a bunch of other things, right? Well, that shows the community where the investment is. Because if you send 2 or 3 people to a conference every year as a fire chief, that's an investment. Just like when you send them to the National Fire Academy, that's an investment we're all making, right? Because my tax dollars help and fund that. So that we're all investing in that. And so it's kind of interesting when we kind of think about it like that. We've been going for quite a while. Well, not quite a while, but almost 40 minutes. So I want to go kind of a little quicker around the horn about what you think this could look like, or the impact if it's not there. I mean, and you can take that as if it comes back 50% or 70%, or what you think if it's not there. So, Tiger, we haven't been starting out with you much, Chief. So why don't we start with you? Let's just, it doesn't come back the same way. Where's the void? What is the void, and how do we feel the void?
Well, you could argue ultimately we could end up with a dumber fire service, if I could dare use that word, right? We're a dumbed down fire service that doesn't have access to the knowledge, the experience, and also the interactions that everyone benefits from when they take a National Fire Academy course. That has cascading effects literally down to the citizen level and the community level. Absolutely, without question. What concerns me most is that there's a certain percentage of our fire service that doesn't know it exists yet, so they won't miss it. And that pains me dearly. But those who have always had the goal of going, or have only been able to experience a local outreach offering of an NFA course, but haven't gotten to Mecca yet, they're going to feel that pain. And they're definitely going to miss it, because I don't know of anybody who's ever gone to the National Fire Academy or taken one of the field outreach courses who can't honestly say that it didn't make them a better person, a better firefighter, a better responder, a better emergency manager, whatever the role is. I think, and I'm glad you brought it up, John, you're talking about community risk reduction, and I'm just a dabbler in that field. And admittedly, now with 45 years of service, it's something that has always not been on my radar, right? But I belong to a small volunteer fire company. We're about 20 miles south of Buffalo. Our call volume doubled in 2 years. That's not sustainable under our current staffing model, nor our current risk reduction model, which is virtually non-existent, right? We have to reduce our call volume. And it starts with simple public education of when and when not to dial 911. Those are critical strategies and tactics that I need to learn from an NFA course. Now, I'm blessed with a wide network of people like Mike McClear and others who, are subject matter experts in that field, that I can kind of skip the line a little bit to simply get to the outcomes and get to the information and how best to distribute it and so forth. But that's not sustainable either, right? I'm taking the cheating route because we need to get to market as quickly as possible. We're in crisis mode in terms of EMS, that we need to change our focus. And that's really where community risk reduction plays into for us. It's not the fire problem, it's the EMS challenge, right? And it's a systemic challenge, and there's only so much we have control over. But the part we do have, not necessarily control, but certainly we can influence, comes through courses like community risk reduction, their entire program through the NFA, right? And that is educating our public. So to diminish any of that, to steal that away from us, to not have access to that, to not have that available, I think can be equated to dollars and cents in terms of the real world impact that it's going to have on the cost of service delivery, or the cost of not having those services to deliver, right? I've long said that, the fire service, we're the only business in business to put ourselves out of business.
Ain't that the truth?
The harsh reality is never going to run out of stupid human tricks. And that's simply not going to happen, that we're going to be out of business. But we also can't afford for the National Fire Academy to be out of business either.
Excellent. Chief Guarnera?
It's hard to fathom that would ever happen. But reality, you never know what's going to happen. I think if the National Fire Academy ceases to exist, it's gonna have a negative effect on us directly or indirectly. I mean, you have some of the greatest chiefs coming out of there through the EFO program. I mean, you look at a lot of chiefs jobs now, especially in big, large departments, even down to the smaller departments, they're looking for EFO
Mm-hmm.
because EFO is recognized as being the pinnacle of chief fire officer training. And now they have the MFO, and that's right
Mhm.
behind it. So I think indirectly, we're all going to be affected by it. I mean, we'll pull up our boots and go forward, but it'll never be to the caliber of what we're doing now.
Right.
And we're able to take these classes for free. What else do you get in the world that's free? Not much. And we're getting, like I said, college graduate degree, baccalaureate degree programs for free.
Yeah.
Taught by, again, to me, I think are the pinnacle people in what we're doing. Whether it's FDIC, another great place to go. But National Fire Academy, and what happens at the National Fire Academy too, it's ever evolving. When there's a paradigm change, they change. It's just that's what you have to do. And critical, community risk reduction. We actually have a whole new group panel committee in our FISHI program to insert CRR in our programs because it is such a pinnacle thing we do. And I think again, I think just we're all going to be affected somehow. I can't even fathom or even think that it's going to stop. So I'm just hoping that it's not, because I'll be lost because I like going there. I just enjoy the classes. And you brought up the fire investigation class. I've taken fire investigation basic and advanced, through local programs. But man, I went to that fire investigation program, that 2-week program. What a phenomenal program. It's like it's available to anybody. It's hard to get in, same way as EFO, but you learn from the best. It's just what it is.
Right.
Dean, before John jumps in, if I
Yeah.
can comment to something that Joe kind of triggered in me, and that is one of my other concerns is, we live in such a soundbite society today, right? And agree. I've taught at FDIC for 12 years and attended classes there and so forth. But you think about it, those hour and 45 minute segments and so forth. That's the soundbite equivalent of training in our fire service today. And if that's all we have left, if the NFA goes away, and we don't have the long form of not only, again, from strategy and tactics, but also the time and the energy to bring context to all of it, it will no longer have relevance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It's just not, they can't take it and say, okay, how can I apply that? It sounds great. It's a buzzword. It's whatever, but how does that have real world application for me? And that's what the NFA provides, is that both that foundation, and I love what you talked about, how they've morphed into so much more of whatever fire and emergency services needs it to be. It is, it provides us with that stability that we need so much in an ever evolving environment.
Yeah. Yep. John, your thoughts?
For each of the different aspects of the National Fire Academy, it provides not necessarily a capstone, but it provides that higher level that there's other places we can try to get this, but it's all in one place. And will others step in the gap? Sure. But will we be able to have a concerted, coordinated effort to be able to do that? Not necessarily. I want to take this in the other direction. I want to say that when we come back, we're going to come back stronger. There's 30,000 fire departments in the United States right now, 1.2 something million firefighters. Last year, we saw 60,000 at NFA classes, either resident or state sponsored. That number has to go up. In Texas, there's 1,500 fire departments, and that's growing exponentially because of our exponential growth rate here. So it's probably more like 1,550 this year. I heard at a conference recently, we went up 50 emergency services districts just last year. So that's generally means 50 departments or departments that have been refounded. But with that 1,500 departments just in Texas, when they split up the EFO, there's only 500 people allowed to apply for 150 spots. Generally, they're looking at about 2 a state. There's 100 right there. You got 50 more that everyone else is competing for. Texas did very well in the 2024 cohort. We have several, but not everyone's able to do that. We talked earlier, Tiger, I think you mentioned it's usually the preferred qualification for a fire chief. There's so few, it's becoming harder and harder to do. What I want to see the new envisioned NFA is when they do this audit, they find we aren't offering enough seats. So we need to find ways to bump up the residency classes and possibly take some of this on the road. I know we've all talked about the great things that happen at residents in Emmitsburg, but there's ways, like I mentioned earlier, when I went to Stephenville, Texas, to Longview, Texas, to go to some of these NFA state offerings, that I went out of town so I can get out of my comfort zone. There's ways to replicate, if not entirely, in part at least, of the networking aspect that you can get out of going to Emmitsburg. We might need to re-envision how we do this going forward. We have to offer more seats, one way or the other. It needs to be more seats so we can have a better educated fire service, so we can provide better return on investment for our citizens of this country, our states, and our communities.
Yeah, Chief, I think that's a great way to put it, right? We need more seats. And I said it in the last episode, and we had a panel discussion, and one of the things that came up was, what if in the course of the audit they do find some waste, right? They find some waste, and they say, but you're spending the rest of your money really well. Like, you actually do a really good job spending money. We found some stuff over here that maybe we don't need to do anymore, but why don't we take that money that we don't think you need to do over there anymore, and why don't you put it at this thing you're doing really well? And, that might be a little bit of a dream, but the reality is, if you've got somebody that's spending the money right, then why wouldn't you give them more money to spend? So, they come out of the audit and they go, hey, 97% of what you do, you're actually doing pretty good at. The money's tight, everything, sure. We've got some waste over here. Sure, okay, there's some waste. I really hope it's not in the ice cream machine. Like, I really hope that's not where the waste is, right? I mean, the ice cream machine has its own, Twitter or its own Insta? I forget. Twitter, yeah, right? I think.
Twitter.
X. X. Like, that's how famous this ice cream machine is. But you could argue that's some waste. Okay, but anyway, but maybe they'll find some stuff and apply it to the things we're doing well, and like you said, increase the number of seats. Tiger, you brought it up, and it's the cascading effect, right? It's like anything. We put our foot on the throttle of anything, and then we don't do it for a while. It takes a while to see the effect. I was taught stop, drop, and roll. I mean, most people are, and still are. There'll come a day where nobody catches fire anymore, and we'll stop talking about it. And then 150, 200, 300 years later, whatever it is, 3 generations, I don't know what it is, forget history, 3 or 4 generations later, they'll be like, wow, people catch fire and they don't know what to do. We got to teach this thing. And somebody will blow some dust off, some old manual, and they'll say, they used to teach us stop, drop, and roll. Maybe we need to bring that back. And that's the problem, is that by the time we really figure out the impact of the National Fire Academy being a gone or changed for the negative, it won't be us that figures it out. It'll be a void in the next generation. Then they go, uh-oh, how come we're all whatever, doing this thing or not doing this thing? And somebody will say, well, wouldn't it be cool if we had a place where we could all go and get standardized and this and that? So it's one of those things, right? If it goes away, it's only going to go away for a couple hundred years. And I know that sounds even crazy to say out loud, right? But that's what happens. It'll be less because of technology. It'll, in 6 or 7 or 10 years, somebody will say, why are our firehouses getting into more trouble? Why are people getting in more trouble? What changed? And somebody will go back to January, or rather March of 2025, and they'll say, oh, this is what changed. We hit this switch. We turned off this program. And since then, we've been on a steady decline in some areas. But Joe's right. I mean, we'll pull up our bootstraps because we always do. And there'll be people that pivot and whatever that is, right? Whether it's private organizations, whether it's big nonprofits, whether it's state entities, or whether it's, whether it's small independent, instructors that are more than capable, we're gonna see that void get filled. I hope, but it will never. It wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same. So, we were gonna go around and talk about what people can do, but I think the reality is by now everybody's heard what they can do. If you're looking for something quick and easy to do, I'm going to tell you right now, the tool that the International Association of Fire Chiefs has is super easy to use. If you go to the IFC's website and you go into like their legislative section, there's a tool for an action. You put in your name, you put in your physical address. It tells you who your representatives are. It puts in, it's a mail merge. It puts in their email addresses. You type in your name and you hit send, and it goes, and they get it because I've already got my responses. Like, that's a thing. So if you're looking for something quick and electronic, the IFC's got a great tool. You can always search for your representatives on the internet, and you can send them a letter. I think there's great power in that. On Talkin Fire social media a couple days ago, we put up a draft letter. I'll put it up again probably tonight or tomorrow, that people can use to just kind of model something that basically says, hey, representative, we care. This is important to us, and this is why. So, you can always send snail mail. People still if you think about it, most elected officials, unfortunately, are, they've been there a while. I'll politely say that. They probably read spam. Yeah, they probably read the mail more than they even read the email, right? Because that's, and I have to say that I'm someone who likes the Postal Service. I like supporting them, and I do buy stamps fairly regularly. So anyway, so there's that, right? And Dr. O'Neill said it the other day in a post, or in a comment on a post. He said, and it was somebody had wrote a very nice post about the National Fire Academy, and he said, hey, this is a great post, but please know sharing on social media is not enough. This podcast is not enough. None of this stuff is enough. We've got to make professional noise, and we've got to make sure that our elected officials, our representatives, know how we feel and why we feel that, right? The why. It was said earlier, I think Tiger said it, the why. We have to communicate that why. So we'll go around the horn one last time with any closing thoughts. Before we do that, we'll go right around. We'll go Joe, John, and then Tiger. Before we do that, though, I'm going to thank the three of you right here, right now. This all came on my ride home last Friday. I got, like a lot of us did, right? I got a text message with a screenshot and some expletives, and somebody said, "Can you believe this?" And I was like, well, didn't drive off the road, but I was like, okay. And I called a couple friends real quick, and I said, I don't know what I can do because all I know how to do is talk. So like that's the only thing I'm good at. So I said, well, I know what I can do, and I reached out to you folks. I reached out to some other folks, and the interest was overwhelming. And I'm a podcaster with 4 episodes before this and some friends, right? That's all I got. And a whole bunch of those people, but some friends. And I probably had 8 or 9 yeses within the first 24 hours. And the 3 of you are on that list, right? And since then, I've probably got another 7 or 8, like, hey, I'm sorry I didn't get to you right away, but like I was interested, but I get like this is kind of timely, and maybe we get something in the future. So the people want to take action. And so anyway, so I thank you for being here. We'll go around the horn, and then we'll kind of be done here. Joe, Chief Guarnera, any closing thoughts?
First, Dean, thank you for doing what you're doing. It's a great thing for everybody in the fire service, even if they're not in the fire service. It gives them an education about what we do. The FESHI, we do have our FESHI conference this year. If I can just join that, tell you a little bit about that, and that's going to be June 19th and 20th at the National Fire Academy. Travel dates are the 18th and the 21st. Gordon Graham is going to be our keynote speaker on day 1. And Hayden Duggan, who's a curriculum and stress person out of Massachusetts, along with Tommy Greenhall. They're the keynote speakers for day 2. It's class R as in Robert 0178. R as in Robert 0178. Going to be a lot of good topics and about what the fire service does for us and how we can teach our our students, our fellow firefighters, educational wise, and get them up to where they should be in knowledge. And again, thank you both for also being a part of this. John and Tiger, for being this. Thanks, and we'll get through this. I'm sure we will. And thanks again, Dean.
Joe, thank you. Chief Yovanovitch, I said your name again so that I could prove that I could say it. You don't know this, but in the intro video I did like a day ago, my wife was laughing. I must have recorded that video about 15 times to get your name close. And I know it. That's the problem, is I can say it, but put it on video and I struggle.
It's gone. Yeah. Joe's good to hear about Fesci. Hopefully we've reopened the NFA by then. I'll meet you in the command post Tuesday night when you get there. I'll be there hopefully for my third residency for EFO, but we'll see how things work out. But yeah, the biggest thing, we've touched on this already, do something. Keyboard warriors posting on social media, I've done several of those, but that's not enough. Reach out with the tools that Dean's mentioned. Talk to your neighbors.
Yeah.
Educate them. Why is this important? Let them know why the NFA is important to the fire service and to them. Why a civilian needs the National Fire Academy.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Chief Schmittendorf?
I'm going to take kind of a different tact, and I'm going to speak to the newest firefighters in our fire service with great hope and prayer that the NFA returns in its current form or even better. And if it doesn't, in whatever form that looks like, don't make the same mistake I did. I look back and I think for the first 10 years of my life in the fire service, I pretty much couldn't tell you what went on outside our engine room doors. And it was a singular event that kind of catapulted me forward outside of those doors. And I can tell you there was no looking back. And it was the invitation to be part of a National Fire Academy course. And that's the impact that's had on me. Don't make the same mistake I did. It's a brave new world out there in today's fire and emergency services. Get out, explore it all. And if you're either looking for a ride or somebody to ride along, get a hold of me.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, like I said, thank the three of you for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time when we'll be talking fire.